Okay, welcome back to Miss Curtis's art class. Today I am going to be teaching you how to use the grid method to draw a photograph realistically. So this is one of my favorite ways to teach students how to draw, and they always come up with results that they're very happy about. So if you've been intimidated to draw something realistic, you definitely can. You just have to break it down into steps, and today I'm going to teach you how. So the materials you are going to need for this project is a photograph of your choice, either a piece of paper or a canvas or a panel. This is a flat masonite panel that has been gessoed or primed on one side so that it's ready to go for paint. You will also need a ruler. So this is just your standard 12-inch ruler, a pencil, and I have scissors because I had to cut my paper. So in class, I would already have your photographs cut to size. So for this project, we are doing an 8-inch by 10-inch photograph, and that is going to transfer perfectly to an 8-inch by 10-inch piece of paper. And the same for this. This panel right here is 8 inches by 10. So let's say you wanted to do a photograph that was 5 by 7, just make sure that your paper is sized 5 by 7 as well. And then if you wanted to, if you have a smaller photograph and it's like a 4 by 6 and you wanted to paint it 8 by 12, so you wanted it a little bit larger, so it's doubling in size, you can do that. And I'm gonna show you how. That's for another video. But for this one specifically, we are taking our image and we are drawing it perfectly to size and just breaking it down by steps. So let's get started. First step that you're gonna wanna do is create a 1-inch by 1-inch grid on your photographed piece of paper. Or again, if you're using a real photograph, you can do that as well. So the first thing I teach my students is to take that ruler and where it starts at 0. So for this ruler, as you can see, well, it's kind of hard because it's clear here, but the 0 mark is a little bit into the ruler. So it's not at the very edge of the ruler, okay? Your 0 mark might be at the very edge, so just double check that. Then you are going to place your ruler down so that it is at that 0 or that start of the ruler, okay? And you are going to just notice, if you look across, it should be 8 inches where the paper ends. Okay, so over here I have 8 inches, and then over here is the start, 0. Okay, I am leaving just a tiny bit of space at the top, so my paper is just poking out just a little bit all the way across, and that is where I'm going to make my inch marks. Okay, I'm going to take a pencil, I'm going to hold my ruler, so I'm holding it with my opposite hand nice and tight, and I'm going to start off at the 1-inch mark. You don't need to mark 0 because that's the edge of the paper. So I am just going up and down and I'm pressing decently hard so I can see my pencil line. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'm not marking 8 because again, that's the edge to the right over here. And just double check that you really hit the inch marks. So sometimes it gets a little confusing where you might see like the number 6 or 5, but just double check. It should be a longer line right here, and that's where your inch marks are, okay? All right. The next step, once you have marked off the top, okay, so I have my marks going across the top, you are going to pull your ruler down to the bottom of the paper and do the same thing, but watch me first. Again, double check. Are you starting where the 0 mark is on the ruler? Put that 0 mark right at the left side of the paper so that it's perfectly lined up, and you should notice that it should be 8 inches across as well. And now I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to mark 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, leaving 8 because it's the edge. Okay, so now I have marks at the top and at the bottom, and I am going to take my ruler and connect these. Now, this is so important. You have to do marks at the top and at the bottom, or else you'll be off. Sometimes I have students who just do marks at the top and they think they can skip the bottom portion, and then they notice that their lines are completely off. So please make sure that you do marks at the top and the bottom. Now I'm going to take my ruler And I'm simply going to make sure it lines up. Notice that it's like turning a little bit, so you have to double check. Like even if you get the top lined up, the bottom might shift. Once you have it exactly correct, where it's lined up with each dash, the first dash at the top and the first at the bottom, hold your ruler really tight. And then I'm gonna take this pencil and go back and forth. Notice I'm going up and down and up and down. And this really helps make a nice dark pencil line so that it's going to shine and I'm going to be able to see it clearly on my paper. Okay, so if I show you this, you can see that shine, which is really nice, and that helps a lot. Okay, so I am going to continue to mark off from each inch marker going forward. So now I'm at the second two, and these are gonna connect. And I'm going to continue to do this all the way across my paper. And I'll show you what that looks like and speed this up for you right now. Okay, so as you can see, I finished my lines that are going straight down, up and down. And now I'm going to turn my paper so that I can finish the second half of the grid. So if you've made it this far, you're about halfway done, which is awesome. I think this is the part of this project that students don't really love to do. No one really loves making the grid, but once you make it, it is so worth it because then when you start to draw, it just makes everything so much easier. So a great grid from the start is key. Okay, so now I've turned my paper and I have it in landscape mode. I am again looking for the 0 marker on my ruler, putting it at the top left of my paper and letting it go across. It should be 10 inches, so double check it should be 10. Again, we're doing an 8x10 photo, and I'm leaving a tiny bit of space at the top. I am going to hold my ruler down and I'm going to make marks at each inch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. The next step, just like we did before, pull your ruler down. And this is another thing, I say to pull the ruler down because if you turn your paper, sometimes it might be a little bit off just because maybe the paper is just a smidgen off on each side and then it does mess up your marks. So always pull that ruler down. I am now again at the 0 mark, going across. I can see I have it lined up perfectly from 0 to 10, holding my ruler and making my marks again at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to connect these marks. So the first two, let's see, oh my goodness, this is getting caught right here. Okay, hold this down, make sure it's lined up. And again, making a nice dark pencil line. And I'm gonna continue this where each mark lines up. So where I had the second inch and the second inch at the top, I'm going to make them connect. All right, I will speed this up and you can see how this looks. All right, so as you can see, I have my squares and they are perfectly 1 inch by 1 inch. You can even go and check and you will see that they measure up that way. Comes out really nice, okay? And the last step is to now make numbers going across, you'll see, and then letters going down, and this is going to correspond to the grid. So literally it's kind of like a paint by number, I guess you could say, because you go, all right, I'm gonna draw what's in box 4A, and then you come across and it's easy to find it on your paper. So at the top, and don't put them right in the middle, it's going to be towards the top. I'm going to put the number 1, 2, 3. There's this little thing on the table and I keep like making holes on my paper with it. Okay, 4, and 5, 6, 7, 8. So So you should have 8 boxes at the top going across, and then A, B, C, D, E, whoops, F, G, H, I, J. Okay, so our reference photo is ready to go. The grid is on it, so are the numbers and the letters. On the back, if you haven't done so already, make sure your name is on the back so this is not lost. Okay, and if I wanted to, I could literally start right now with this piece of paper that I pre-gridded. This is, if I put it on top, you can see they perfectly match. It's an 8 by 10. I would just lightly number the top and lightly put the letters down the side. And that's the next thing I'm gonna teach you. So on this piece of paper, I press the pencil down very hard. On the piece of paper and also on your canvas, you are going to want to create lighter lines so that you can erase it after and you don't see it. Okay, so make sure that you are not doing them as harsh as you did on your reference photo. So now I'm going to teach you the same thing, but it's going to be on a blank canvas such as this. So this is exactly 8 by 10, and your paper or canvas in front of you should be the same as well. So at the top, again, I am taking my ruler and just laying it across, leaving a little bit of space for my marks. And as you can see, I started at the 0 and I'm going across and it's 8 inches. So I'm going to hold this ruler in, again, lighter lines. So I'm just very lightly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, pulling my ruler down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm not totally at the bottom, but I'm close enough that I know that this measurement will come out nicely. So I am lining it up, the 1st inch mark with the bottom of the canvas 1st inch mark, and I'm going to just let my pencil just kind of glide down from the top to the bottom. Now, something I want to point out, sometimes students forget to go all the way to the very bottom and to the top. Please don't just go just to your mark, so I'll show you what I mean. So sometimes they'll do this, they'll be like, oh, okay, here's my mark there, and there's my mark at the bottom, and they'll start at that mark and end at that other mark. You have to make sure that your pencil lines go from the very top of the canvas or paper to the bottom. Okay, so it should continue all the way through. So let me just fix that. And again, nice and light so that you can erase it after. And I just hold my pencil just like this and I just kind of pull it down. And I'm going to continue this. I'll speed it up for you. Okay, so now we have our lines vertical going up and down, right? And this is portrait mode. I'm going to turn to landscape mode here, and I'm going to take my ruler, do the same exact thing, leaving a little bit of space at the top. Again, 0 to 10, and make my marks. And just as a little side note, I love using these gessoed panels that are made on the masonite board. They have a very smooth surface compared to painting on a canvas, and I really like that. I used to paint on canvases and they have those little pores, those little textured pores on them. I don't necessarily love that anymore, especially if I'm doing a portrait. I want it to look as realistic as possible. So with that being said, I like to use these panels. Okay, so the next step is to, again, mark off from the top to the bottom. So I'm going to just take my pencil, pull it down. Second marks. in nice and light. Ooh, that one was a little darker. These will erase, but again, just go as light as you can. Especially, I mean, if you look at this piece of paper, you can hardly see it. Okay, so I'm gonna speed this up and then I'm excited to see how yours comes out. Okay, so just like that, we have our grid and I'm going to number it again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 towards the top, so it's not in the way. These are in the same again, 1 and A are in the same box. B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. Okay, so both of these correspond, and this picture printed a little shorter than I had wanted to, so I just kind of like extended where I thought like it would go, which I would never recommend. And again, I would never print your pictures like this, but this is just for me showing you how now to draw this step by step or box by box. Okay, so I am ready to go. I am going to draw on the gessoed panel versus the piece of paper, and then I'm going to start off by teaching you how to draw this box by box, and after that I'm going to speed it up and show you the end result, and you will get a chance to draw as well. All right, so personally I am a righty, so when I draw I tend to work going this way. Now I usually, well, most often when I'm drawing, I will actually start up in the top left corner and then make my way going down and across like this, okay? The reason being is I don't necessarily start on this side because I'm doing that. I start to cover my drawing over here, and I also will start to smear my drawing, and I don't wanna do that. So if you are a lefty, it might be helpful to get in the habit of starting in the top right corner and making your way down going like this through the boxes, okay? So then again, you can see what you're drawing and you can also avoid smudging your drawing. Okay, so that's a big tip that I tell my students. All right, so now doing the grid method is very simple, okay? Don't look at the whole picture. If you look at the entire picture and then think about drawing it on here, it becomes very overwhelming. The point of creating the grid is to break it down into simple shapes and simple lines that anybody could draw. So if you just focus in on one box at a time and you spend time just drawing that, I tell my students, if you spend a class perfecting a few boxes, that's great. Like, I'm fine with that. Take your time. Everybody draws at different paces. So what I'd like you to do is just kind of, and I'm gonna teach you, is to focus in on these boxes. If you can draw one of these, you can do the whole picture. You'd be surprised. Okay, so, and I like this project because it does build a lot of confidence in people with their drawing skills in a way that they didn't really realize that they had. So I noticed that there is nothing in box 1A, so cool, that one's done. That's a gimme right there. 2A, nothing. 3A, maybe a tiny bit in that corner, but not much. And then right when I get over here to 4A, I can tell that there is the curvature of the top of his forehead. So I'm gonna focus in on that. Now here's the trick. I like to tell students, notice where this line starts and ends. We are gonna be looking at the lines that break up different space in color. So again, this is lighter, there's a line here, and then his hair is actually right here. So we're gonna draw these contour lines that are going around. Don't worry about shading in. If you're the type of person that likes to shade things in as you go, just because it helps you figure out where spatially everything is, you can do that, but you don't need to. In fact, I like to have students avoid that because you're gonna erase all your lines at the end, and you don't wanna be erasing through things that you shaded. So I would really recommend actually not doing that, especially if you haven't done this before. So just work on just the contour lines and some of the darker shapes that can be outlined, okay? So I'll show you how that looks. All right, so I'm gonna start with 4A, and I noticed that the line starts at the bottom left corner of 4A, and a little bit higher than the middle. And make sure that you're really looking at how these lines flow, and that's how things look realistic. So it's not a straight line, it's not a perfect curved line. There's some different interesting curvatures here that show the hairline, okay? So look for those details. It's all about the details. All right, so another thing I tell my students is you can also put a dot where it starts on one section and ends at the other. And so you know where you're headed. So now I'm just simply going to lightly follow the exact curvatures that I'm seeing in this picture. Okay. So again, there's actually, if you look closely, it's not a perfect curve. There are some interesting details, and then there's a little curve that goes down here and then it comes up. Okay, so far I've drawn box 4A. All right, now I can move right into 5 and 6. If you get to a point where you are like, let's say you're down here and you're in the eye and you're like, this is really complicated, like I'm not ready for this, you can skip that and you can keep moving around the picture, because the fact that it is a grid. So don't get caught up feeling like, oh my God, I'm really overwhelmed and I can't finish this. Like, just come back to it. I promise that you'll be able to do it. You just need to work on areas that you feel excited about, okay? So maybe it's just like this collar line right here, okay? All right, so now I'm gonna continue. And again, I'm looking, this is towards the top area here, leaving a little bit of space. There's a little bit of negative space, or part of his hair actually up there. And it's going to end towards the top of this line right here. So I'm gonna put a little mark there so I know where I'm going. It's going to come down, just like so. Okay, now I'm already in box 6A. And this one conveniently actually ends right down at this corner right here. I notice that a lot actually when I'm drawing using the grid. I'm like, oh my gosh, how perfect that it ends right there. Okay. So I'm gonna continue this. I'm gonna speed this up and show you how this looks. And then I'm excited to see how yours come out, and take your time. This takes, when I teach this at school, this takes several classes, because I really want students to look for the details. More detail, the better, okay? And just take your time, look for those lines, how they curve, what kind of curvatures are you finding, what kind of details are you able, what kind of shapes. And when you're drawing, especially realistically, sometimes it's gonna look a little off. I notice that I'll be like, this eye seems really strange or small when I'm drawing it. But once you're done and you step back, you're like, oh, okay, that does make sense. And you really wanna look for the details, because that's what makes the person who they are, especially if it's a portrait, okay? Because everybody's got unique little wrinkles, or their eyes are just set a little bit differently. So like I said, don't be afraid of those details and take your time. Okay, so normally I wouldn't do all this extra shading in. I just kind of wanted you to have a better idea of spatially where everything was. So here is the finished drawing or contour drawing of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And now what I would do is go in and erase all of these grid lines, okay? You can erase the numbers and the letters. Once you've have everything drawn on there. And then after that, you would go in and shade it in or paint it in. So it's a very simple process. You would just be very careful, and again, try not to smudge your drawing when you do it. And your pencil lines should be light enough that when you erase, they completely disappear, and all that's left is the image. Make sure you don't erase the image, of course.